teachers, what's the darkest thing you've seen from a student? Had a student in my class as a sophomore. Every morning her junior year she would come in and chat in the morning. One day out of the blue it stopped. In fact, she wasn't at school at all anymore. Fast forward 3 months, she shows up and looks. Brock, I ask her what's going on. After quite a bit of hesitation, she tells me that she went to a party and was DD. No alcohol in her system. However, she woke up the next morning and couldn't remember a thing about the previous night. A couple weeks later, she finds out she is pregnant. She was a virgin before that night, roofied and raped. She had only told her counselor and now me. I haven't had a chance to talk to her due to COVID. Her outlook and demeanor was night and day before and after that party. A student during holiday break a few years back murdered her mother and her mother's boyfriend brutally with the help of her own boyfriend. Then the bodies laid in the apartment as she left and eventually went to a New Year's party days later. Eventually she was arrested along with her boyfriend. Chilling to think she was sitting in my classroom days before, probably with this whole plan in her head. Student would hide in the bushes trying to get near female teacher's feet. Had to advise staff to wear closed-toe sandals/shoes because he was so interested. Discovered he was drawing women with their feet cut off as well as drawing severed feet in high heels. I was student teaching when I was 21. I had a class of high school seniors. One boy was caught telling his friend he planned to grate me in my car. I ended up getting transferred about 2 months into my student teaching experience. I've been assaulted before, so it felt even worse. Edit. I'm really blown away by the kind replies here. Thank you all. I was working at an after-school program as a director site manager, and one of my employees radioed me needing my immediate assistance at the playground. I raced out there. The employees pulled me aside and said that I needed to look at Lil Billy's back. Since it was dark outside she couldn't tell if it was scratch marks or burns. She said she had put in timeout, standing against the basketball pole, and he was trying to lean up against it, but kept making weird spastic moves every time he leaned against it. So she asked to look at his back. After he said it hurt, I asked Lil Billy to follow me to the nurse's office. Leaving the door open, the school staff was all gone. But there are cameras everywhere, and just in case I didn't want anyone thinking I was doing something inappropriate with the kid, since I had no idea what I was about to see and hear, it took everything in my power to not audibly gasp once I lifted the back of his shirt. I counted at least 7 belt loop bruises and 5 lash marks. I asked where he got them from, to which he replied, "My dad." I got a bad grade. This kid got beat with both ends of a belt because he got a P in conduct. I ended up asking his permission to take pictures, and I immediately called CPS. When I showed up to work the next day at 2 PM, City and the ISD police were there. I found out from the CPS person that the woman listed as his mom was the dad's GF, and she knew the beatings were going on, and that this apparently wasn't the first time. CPS and the city police refused to let the GF or dad see him good. Mom lived in a neighboring town, so they removed him immediately and sent him there. That's the last I heard of anything. Not a teacher, but I worked with students. A student was forced to give oral sex in a vehicle while a screwdriver was held to her neck. When he orgasmed, she made a run for it back to her residence. She had the clarity and ingenuity to keep thesum in her mouth and spit it in a cup for evidence. There was a manhunt and the guy was caught. He was convicted of 3 separate student sexual assaults across the state. I was in the emergency room with the student a couple hours after the incident, standing there as she described what happened. Through her tears and in front of her mother was one of the hardest things I've ever had to witness. I didn't see it, but I heard it. I used to work at a shelter for at-risk girls aged 8 to 18. Mainly truancy or runaway cases, but some were taken from homes of abuse, drugs, sex trafficking, etc. We housed and looked after roughly 20 girls at a time when we were at full capacity. Many of them had a lot of mental and emotional issues. One of our youngest girls at the time, around age 9, was talking to an older girl around 13. Teen was nonchalantly talking about how she was great as a young girl before she came to the shelter. Next thing I knew, at least 10 other girls who had overheard the conversation started talking about how old they were when they were raped. Some rattled off multiple ages and times when it occurred, just causally. It was chilling to hear so many young girls tell their tales. My mom was a school nurse and always came home with some crazy stories. One of the most blood-curdling things she has was a girl that was really into cutting to the point where she had a scar that covered the majority of the outside of her bicep. The girl one day decided that she hated her scar and wanted to get rid of it. At home, by herself, she decided she was going to get rid of them. In her bathroom, she took a knife to her arm, cutting a 4 inches by 6 inch piece of scar tissue that was just under an inch thick out of her arm. She then proceeded to stitch it up using a needle and thread and bandage it with gauze all by herself. She then woke up and went to school the next day so she could go to my mom's office and ask if it looked infected. It was. Not a teacher, but I did do a lot of volunteer work with little kids. One of the 5th grade boys was caught grabbing random girls and trying to pull them into the supply closet and try to kiss them. He was even caught trying to grab their butts or would out his hand on their seat as they started to sit down. When we finally got to talk to his parents, turned out his grandpa was teaching him these things. The weirdest part was when we questioned the grandpa about it, his response was, "Who cares? They're just little girls." I was a substitute for a while several years ago. I did the special education classes mostly, everything from kids who simply had a learning disability to students with severe disabilities such as ASD and behavioral issues. One kid had a very low IQ and suffered from ADHD. He would come in every day an absolute mess. He was beyond violent and had zero control over his emotions. It's common to see those sorts of issues in some of these kids, but we didn't understand why it was this bad. He had medication prescribed and on file to help with some of his issues. Well, come to find out, mom had been keeping his medication to do only God knows what with. He wasn't getting anything to help with these very real problems. Eventually this kid lost his shoot on the teacher's aide in the class and the school had to expel him. One class I was in a lot had mostly kids with ADHD, dyslexia, mild behavioral issues, and I really connected with them. It was a challenge, but I loved them. There was a boy, maybe 10 years old, who would talk to me quite a bit about his father, who was in a local rehab program for meth abuse. It was a religious thing that kept people on a campus and had them do church stuff, labor, and volunteer work. Anyway, he would give me updates every few weeks. At the end of the year he comes up and says, "Guess what, Miss Phoenix 0113, I think my dad is gonna come home. He says has not gonna do drugs anymore and has done at rehab. I can't wait for him to come home." He went on about how they were gonna do father-son type things. It was heartbreaking to watch a child deal with a parent in rehab for meth. He was so hopeful and there was a deep love there. I hope sincerely, every time I think of that sweet kid, his dad is healthy and present for his son. Had a kindergartner smash a glass measuring cup and stab himself in the arm to the point that blood was everywhere, all while repeatedly crying, "Please just let me die. I just want to die." Had to sit in my car and cry for about 30 minutes before driving home that day. I taught welding and metal sculpture at the high school level for a year. One morning, one of my students, a quiet, awkward, but really nice young man, came into class and asked me for a band-aid. I asked him what for, and he replied that it was for a burn class hadn't started yet for the day. He showed me, and it was a fresh 2nd-degree burn that was already blistering. It was in the shape of an R. Some kids, if I'm going to be honest, they were bottom performers and troublemakers from a different class of mine, had swiped a small metal letter from one of my supply bins, heated it with a lighter, and then branded this kid on the morning school bus. He had let the kids do it because he really wanted to fit in. He didn't have many friends and these kids had seemed cool because they were always acting out. As a mandatory reporter, I reported it. The police got involved. Other than that, I have no idea what else happened. I substituted at a school for kids with intellectual disabilities and emotional disorders for a while. Majority of the kids had autism to varying degrees. The darker stuff didn't come from the students so much as faculty gossiping about what the students' home lives were like. but from the kids themselves. In one class with more verbal and well-behaved students, occasionally one would, for instance, get frustrated with a problem, start yelling, "None of this shoot matters," followed by what I would call quasi-suicidal/existential ideation. It would kind of set off a chain reaction in the class where other students would sort of rally along in agreement. Not my student. He's from the class next door. When I was student teaching, this child had a confusing home life. Apparently he was adopted by a family member, but it's unclear what happened to his biological parents. Anyway, he goes through these intense mood swings. Multiple times throughout the year he would pull the fire alarm, and made a break for the school's parking lot at one moment, and then deeply apologetic another moment, as if he wasn't in control of himself just an hour ago. During his outbursts he would occasionally attempt to enter a room, and when he found that he couldn't, he would bang the door and scream at the top of his lungs, as if it's a zombie movie. And yes, this is all while instruction is happening. He would literally escape the classroom in the middle of a lesson. He has caused lockdowns. As it turns out, this child is suicidal, and his actions might or might not be self-harming in a sense, since he knows these behaviors would earn him a punishment. Apparently, at home, he's been reported to jump out of a moving car. Later in the year he also told his teacher and para that he wants to die. His class was awesome though. His teacher had the whole class write a note to the kid, and they all wrote such sweet encouraging notes that teacher then made a collage and gave it to him as a gift. After his outburst episodes, when he comes back apologizing, the whole class would give him a group hug. At one point all his teachers talked to him after one of his episodes, basically saying how they have such high expectations for him, how far he has come, and how much further he will go. My mentor teacher attended this talk. She cried after. I imagine I would too. Sometimes there is a comical side to this situation, though. One day as I was teaching science, I saw the principal chasing this kid down the road through the window, somehow wielding a long stick, as if he's about to shepherd him back to his pee, and I had to just keep teaching, and act like I didn't see anything. It was a rough student teaching year. I had stories in my room too. But damn did I learn a lot. 13-yo crying hysterically in class, saying random adult voices are telling him to kill himself. Next day has no memory of incident, but tells me it comes in waves. Disturbing. I'm a teacher. A student saw one of my former co-teachers at some point with his wife and thought she was hot, and my co-teacher took advantage of this to get the student to secretly record his sister taking showers and shoot. He offered videos of his wife performing sexual acts on / with him to the student in exchange. He finally got caught when the student blackmailed the teacher into trying to get the wife to frick him, and when he proposed it to his wife, she called the cops. In elementary school we had a kid with a severe peanut allergy and a teacher caught some kids rubbing peanut butter on the opening of his water bottle. We also had a kid who could describe in detail about how to prepare heroin. I had a kid who really wanted his parents to come to his graduation ceremony, but they were both sex offenders and couldn't be on campus. He just wanted someone there to support him. There's so many things to say here from a middle school teacher. Here are a few. 1. A video started circulating of one of my students curb stomping a cat. Then a few weeks later, the same student was spreading rumors that they were planning to shoot up the school on the last day. This quickly was taken over by the local police and investigated. 2. I've unfortunately seen way too many students suffer from the after effects of all types of abuse, which is truly heartbreaking. 3. Then there is a classic kid that likes to bring weird toys to school like Barbie doll heads and just play with them, as if they are the only one in the room. He would also bring water in vodka bottles and honestly think nothing was wrong with it. 4. Saw a kid try to jump off the balcony. School is 2 stories. Same kid also put their hands aggressively on another teacher. I think the scariest thing is just realizing that there is a chance that you are witnessing the childhood years of a serial killer. One of my teacher friends told me about a student that had super troubled, abusive childhood, had a history of torturing animals, and he would make comments to female students about how much he liked their skin in a beyond creepy way. I'm not a teacher, but I did see this one kid sitting right at the front of the class beating his meat to the teacher while she was explaining something to us. She eventually saw it, screamed with shock, and ran out of the class. The teacher next to me in one portable classroom arrived to find a used condom tied to the doorknob. They did catch the kid that placed it there. It shocked everyone. My first year teaching was, like everyone says, the worst year. The first day of school, I'm getting to know the kids by asking them random questions, and I ask this one boy what he wants to be when he grows up, and he replies with, "Doesn't matter, I'm going to end up in prison like my parents." Woo, okay. From there things got progressively worse. He was hearing voices and always threatening to hurt other staff or students. He was hitting his head on walls or windows when frustrated. He came back from spring break and told me the voices told him to kill a cat he found. By the end of the year he was sexually assaulting girls at school. When I was a student teacher, I taught briefly at a school with very old school approach to teaching, desks in rows. Nothing is shared, no group collaboration. Students don't engage, only list. The demographic that went to this school took their children's education very seriously, and students had very strict parents. On one of the first days meeting my class of grade 3 students, I had the students wash their hands before doing an activity. I was helping some students roll up their sleeves while they were washing. I got to the last student, and my mentor teacher tells me to stop, which caught me by surprise. She pulled me over and told me that particular student had cuts and bruises all the way up his arm from alleged domestic abuse. The relevant government agencies were already involved in the case. She noticed it when she realized he always flinched when she came near his arms. The fact that he never gave high fives, or that he only ever wore long sleeve shirts to school. It was one of those sobering moments where you realize there is still evil in this world. Not a teacher, but when I was in 5th grade my school had a buddy system. Since I was the oldest out of 7 kids, I grew up learning how to take care of troublesome kids. The buddy system went like this. A 5th grader would be assigned a kindergartner. The two classes met every Wednesday and did arts and crafts together. Since my teacher saw I was strict with kids and knew how to take care and be responsible with kids, I was put with the most problematic kid. This kid misbehaved a lot, and I got him to become a lot better, and didn't think much of it until one day this happened. We were helping the kids cut things out, and they gave us big kids real scissors. I had turned around for just a little to ask my classmate what the next step was, when I felt a very sharp pain on my arm. When I turned around I saw that this little kid had cut me. Not a big cut, but still. I didn't yell, but I asked him why he did that. He then told me that that is what his mom did to him, and that it was just tougher love. It turns out that this kid had been abused and cut by his mother so much he thought that it was love. It was rough. I've got two. I had a student casually tell me about how he pulled the eyes out of his rabbit's head. He explained how there was blood everywhere. This was my first day working as a supply teacher at that school, and my first conversation with the student. I later brought it up to support staff and they were shocked he mentioned it to me. Apparently he killed his rabbit because his mom loved it more than she loved him. The boy was now in foster care as his mother was a drug addict. He shared a lot of really dark stuff with me that day. Another one more sad than dark was at a different school. Students had to write their address for an assignment, but this 4th grade girl didn't know hers. Another student asked me, "Do you know where the so and so motel is? She lives there." Really broke my heart, as this girl was so young and innocent, and didn't really understand how unfortunate her living situation was, as she proudly googled the motel and found her address. Really low income part of town.